You wake up at 3 in the morning, freeze your toes off on the damp riverbank, catch absolutely nothing, and go home angry. Meanwhile, the guy who arrived at noon and sat in your exact spot is hauling in river monsters. Sounds familiar, right? Today, we are talking about the most painful mistake you make on the water. I am going to reveal exactly why the fish seem to start biting the very second you put your tackle box in the trunk of your car. By the end of this video, you will discover a surprising truth about fish behavior that will make you rethink every time you decide to quit early. Are you fishing on the schedule of the fish, or are you just fishing on your own impatient schedule? Let us find out. This topic is incredibly important because it touches the very core of our fishing habits. We all grew up with those classic grandfather rules. You have to be on the water before dawn, and if they are not biting by 10 in the morning, the day is done. These ingrained habits force millions of ordinary fishermen to do the exact same thing for decades. We sit, we wait for a few hours, we get bored, and we pack up. But the science of the water, the actual biology of the fish, completely contradicts this rigid schedule. We are letting outdated traditions blind us to the real signs nature is giving us, and it is costing us the best catches of our lives. Let us picture a very familiar scene. You are sitting on the bank of your favorite lake. The mist is still rolling over the water. You have been here since 4 in the morning. Your rods are cast. Your bait is perfectly presented, and yet the water is completely dead. Not a single twitch on the rod tip, not a single splash on the surface. You look at your watch, see that it is almost 10 in the morning, and you start feeling that heavy disappointment. You think to yourself that the fish are just not active today, and maybe the pressure is wrong, maybe the wind is blowing from the wrong direction. So you start slowly reeling in your first rod. You start folding your chair. But here is the hard truth that you are missing in that exact moment. The water is not dead at all. The fish are there. They are watching your bait. They are just waiting for the perfect trigger to start feeding. And by packing up your gear right now, you are literally walking away from the exact moment the underwater switch is about to flip. You are letting your frustration make the decision instead of reading the natural signs around you. We all grew up listening to the same old fishing advice. Your grandfather probably told you that if you are not on the water before the sun comes up, you might as well stay in bed. This idea has been drilled into our heads for decades. The early bird catches the worm, right? Well, let me tell you something that might upset a few old school anglers. That rule is an absolute myth in many modern fishing situations. Yes, dawn can be a good time to catch a few active fish, but it is rarely the time when the real chaotic feeding frenzy happens. When you arrive at dawn, the water is at its absolute coldest point after the long night. The metabolism of the fish is incredibly slow. They might take a lazy bite if the bait drops right on their nose, but they are not aggressively hunting. You sit there freezing, staring at a motionless float, completely exhausting your patience. And right when the sun finally warms up the shallows and the fish actually wake up, you are already packing your bags. You are letting an outdated piece of advice dictate your entire fishing trip, completely ignoring what the fish actually need to start feeding aggressively. Let us talk about what actually happens under the surface as the morning progresses. When you are drinking your third cup of coffee from the thermos and cursing the bad bite, the sun is finally doing its job. It is hitting the surface of the water. Now, you might not feel a huge difference in the air temperature, but the top layer of the water is starting to warm up. This is a crucial transitional phase. Even an increase of 1 or 2 degrees is like an alarm clock ringing underwater. The tiny aquatic insects start to move. The microscopic plankton begins to rise toward the light. And where the small food goes, the small fish follow. You might look out over the water and still see nothing, thinking it is time to go home. But right in front of you, a massive underwater migration is taking place. The big predators, the ones you actually came to catch, are feeling this temperature shift. They are moving out of the deep, cold holes and positioning themselves near the drop-offs, waiting for the bait fish to become active. Just as this entire food chain locks into place and the dinner bell rings, you are literally putting your tackle box in the trunk of your car. There is a very specific psychological breaking point that every fisherman experiences. It usually happens around 4 or 5 hours into a trip without a bite. You start doubting everything. You doubt your choice of bait. You doubt the spot you picked. You even start wondering if there are any fish left in the lake at all. This mental fatigue is your worst enemy on the water. You look at the guy fishing 50 yards away, and he is just sitting there quietly. You convince yourself that he is wasting his time too. The urge to pack up becomes overwhelming. You think about the warm lunch waiting at home. You think about the chores you have to do in the garage. So you make the decision to quit, but this breaking point is an illusion created by your own boredom. It has absolutely nothing to do with the feeding patterns of the fish. Fishing is a test of endurance, and the real frenzy usually begins just 30 minutes after the average guy loses his mind and gives up. The fish do not care about your boredom. They operate on biological triggers. And if you let your lack of patience dictate your schedule, you will always leave right before the magic happens. Have you ever noticed how the water sometimes gets incredibly quiet right before a storm? Or how the wind just dies down completely around midday? Most ordinary fishermen misinterpret this absolute silence. You sit in your chair, look at the glass-like surface of the lake and think that the fish have gone to sleep. You tell your buddy that the bite is dead and it is time to reel them in. But let me break down what this silence actually means. It is often the quiet before the storm. When the surface gets calm, the fish can suddenly sense vibrations and movements much better. The big predators are actually using this quiet time to stalk their prey. They are silently pushing the schools of bait fish into the shallow bays or up against a weed bed. The lack of surface action is not a sign of an empty lake. It is a sign of intense, calculated preparation happening right below your float. If you pack up during this heavy silence, you are walking away from the exact moment the trap is about to spring. The moment you start up your car engine, the water behind you is going to erupt in a massive, chaotic feeding frenzy. Let us talk about that nervous habit we all have when the fish are not biting, the constant checking of the bait. You have been sitting for 2 hours, nothing is happening, so you reel in your line, inspect the worm, maybe add a fresh piece of corn, and cast it out again. You do this every 15 minutes because you feel like you need to be doing something active. And then when you finally decide it is time to go home, you reel in for the last time with disgust. Here is the massive mistake you are making. By constantly pulling your bait out of the strike zone, you are resetting the clock every single time. Big, cautious fish will often watch a piece of bait for 20 or 30 minutes before deciding to eat it. They are inspecting it. They are waiting to see if it moves unnaturally. Right when that monster fish finally opens its mouth to take your bait, you yank it away to check it. And when you finally get tired of checking and pack up to leave, you leave behind a perfectly chummed spot that the fish are finally ready to vacuum up. Your restless hands are literally stealing the fish from your own hook right before the frenzy starts. There is a massive natural trigger that most fishermen completely ignore when they are getting ready to leave. It is the subtle shift in the wind. You have been sitting there all morning in a dead calm, or maybe with the wind blowing directly in your face. Nothing is biting. You start putting your landing net away. But right at that moment, the wind suddenly changes direction. It starts blowing a gentle breeze across the water, creating those small ripples on the surface. Instead of seeing this as a sign to stay, you just zip up your jacket and keep packing. You are making a huge error. That fresh breeze is doing two incredibly important things. First, it is breaking up the surface tension, which reduces the light penetration and makes the fish feel safe enough to come out of hiding. Second, and most importantly, it is pushing a fresh supply of oxygen into the upper layers of the water. This sudden rush of oxygen acts like a shot of adrenaline for the entire ecosystem. The baitfish get active, and the predators instantly turn on their hunting instincts. By leaving when the wind shifts, you are abandoning your spot at the exact second the underwater switch is turned on to full power. Let us think about the position of the sun. When you arrive at dawn, the sun is low, casting long shadows across the water. As the morning drags on into midday, the sun gets high and bright. The common old-school belief is that fish hate the bright midday sun, so you should definitely pack up and be home for lunch by noon. But let us look at the reality of the situation. As the sun moves, the shadows shift. That large tree on the bank or that steep drop-off underwater is now creating a brand new line of shade that did not exist at 6 in the morning. Big fish love these new sharp shadow lines. They use them as ambush points. They will position themselves right on the edge of the dark water, waiting for smaller fish to swim by in the bright light. If you pack up just because it is getting close to noon, you are completely missing this new dynamic. The feeding frenzy does not stop because the sun is high. It just moves to a different location right in front of you. You just need to adjust your cast to hit those new shadow lines instead of throwing in the towel and walking away in frustration. Many guys sit on the bank and wait for a bite as if fishing is just a random game of chance. You cast out, cross your fingers, and hope a fish swims by. When nothing happens for 4 hours, you pack up and leave. But you need to understand that a feeding frenzy is not a random event. It is a biological chain reaction, and it takes time to build up. Imagine you threw out a few handfuls of ground bait when you arrived. For the first 2 hours, nothing happens. Then microscopic creatures start feeding on the dissolved particles. Next, tiny minnows arrive to eat the microscopic creatures. Then slightly larger fish come to eat the minnows. This process can take 3, 4, or even 5 hours to reach its peak. It is a slow, silent build-up. Right at the moment when the really big predators finally notice the commotion and move in to destroy the school of baitfish, you are busy folding up your fishing chair. You have literally spent all morning building a magnificent underwater restaurant, and just as the VIP guests arrive to eat, you turn off the lights and lock the doors. It is the ultimate tragedy of the impatient fisherman. There is a secret feeding window that almost nobody talks about, and it is the exact reason why you miss the best action. It is the midday feeding frenzy. Look around any popular lake at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Half the fishermen have already gone home. The parking lot is emptying out. The guys who are still there are mostly asleep in their chairs. Everyone believes the bite is over, but here is the shocking truth. Many large species of fish actually prefer to feed aggressively in the middle of the day, especially during the cooler months. The water has finally reached its maximum temperature for the day. The digestion process of the fish is working at its absolute fastest rate. They are hungry and they are active. While everyone else is driving home convinced that the lake is completely dead, the water is actually boiling with activity in the slightly deeper channels. If you can push past that mental barrier and keep your lines in the water during this midday period, you will often experience the most aggressive and chaotic bites of your entire life. Do not let the lazy habits of the crowd dictate when you pack your bags. Let us talk about the actual physical process of packing up your gear. You have decided the fishing is terrible today. You stand up, stretch your back, and start tossing heavy tackle boxes into your bags. You drop your metal rod rest on the ground. You stomp around the bank, completely abandoning the stealthy approach you had early in the morning. Here is what is happening underwater while you are making all that noise. The big fish, the cautious veterans of the lake, have actually been slowly moving toward your baited area for the last hour. They send smaller scout fish in first to check if the area is safe. These big fish, hovering just on the edge of your spot, finally ready to commit and start a massive feeding frenzy. And then bang, you drop a heavy bucket on the rocks. The sound waves travel instantly through the water. You spook the entire school in a fraction of a second. The frenzy was literally 5 minutes away, but your clumsy, frustrated packing routine just destroyed it. You leave thinking there were no fish, completely unaware that you personally chased away the biggest catch of the season with your own noise. We need to discuss barometric pressure because it is the invisible hand that controls everything in the lake. You might be sitting there under a clear blue sky, getting absolutely 0 bites. You look at your phone, see that rain is forecasted for later in the afternoon, and decide to pack up early to avoid getting wet. You think to yourself that the fish are shut down anyway. This is the biggest tactical mistake you can make. Fish are incredibly sensitive to drops in barometric pressure. They can feel a storm coming hours before the first drop of rain falls. When the pressure starts to drop, it triggers a survival instinct in the fish. They know bad weather is coming, so they feel a sudden, desperate urge to gorge themselves on food before the storm hits. This creates the most violent and spectacular feeding frenzies you will ever witness. By leaving early to stay dry, you are walking away right before the pressure drops to that magic level. The fish turn into absolute eating machines, striking at anything that moves, and you are missing it because you did not want to put on a raincoat. Patience through the weather changes is always rewarded. Let us analyze a very specific situation that drives ordinary fishermen crazy. You have been catching tiny, annoying fish all morning. Every time your bait hits the water, a little roach or perch instantly destroys it. After 3 hours of this nonsense, you are totally fed up. You assume that the big fish are simply not in the area, and you start packing away your gear. You complain to your buddy that the spot is totally overrun by small fry, but you are completely misreading the tactical situation. Big predatory fish are lazy by nature. They do not want to chase highly energetic, fast-moving small fish early in the day. Instead, they wait. They hover in the deeper water, watching the small fish dart around and exhaust their energy. When the small fish finally start to slow down and get tired from feeding on your ground bait, the big predators make their move. They rush in to clean up the tired prey. This massive shift in power usually happens right as you are reeling in your final line. If you can just outlast the annoying small fish, you will be there when the monsters arrive to start the real feeding frenzy. We all know the famous tradition of the one last cast. You have already mentally given up. You reel in, put a fresh piece of bait on the hook without really caring, and throw it out one last time while you pack up your chair. Surprisingly often, this lazy last cast results in a massive bite. Have you ever wondered why this happens? It is not just dumb luck. When you are sitting in your chair trying hard to catch fish, you are constantly adjusting the line, tightening the drag, and moving the bait unnaturally. You are tense, and the fish can feel that tension through the line. But when you make that final cast and turn your back to pack your bags, you leave the bait completely still. You let the line go slightly slack. The bait sinks and rests in a completely natural way. The fish that have been watching your nervous, twitching bait all morning finally see something that looks safe and natural. They strike aggressively. If you realize that your own nervous energy is stopping the frenzy, you will understand why the fish only seem to bite when you finally stop trying so hard and prepare to leave. There is a huge misconception about how to read the surface of the water. When fishermen see fish jumping and splashing everywhere, they think a frenzy is happening, but when the surface goes totally flat and undisturbed, they assume the fish have vanished and it is time to pack up. Let me break down this grandpa's myth right now. Fish jumping on the surface are often just cleaning their gills, playing, or escaping tiny parasites. It does not mean they are actively feeding on your bait. On the flip side, the most intense, vicious feeding frenzies often happen right on the bottom of the lake, leaving the surface looking like a piece of polished glass. The big fish have pinned a school of bait to the bottom and are destroying them in the mud. You are sitting on the bank, looking at the calm surface, feeling bored and packing your bags. You are entirely blind to the absolute massacre happening 20 feet straight down. Just because you cannot see the action with your own eyes does not mean the water is dead. You need to trust your instruments and your knowledge of the bottom, rather than letting a calm surface convince you to go home early. Let us talk about a critical mistake regarding where your bait actually is. You have been fishing hard on the bottom all morning. Your heavy lead weights are sinking your bait deep into the mud. You have not had a single bite, so you decide it is time to wrap things up. You start throwing your empty bait boxes into the trash bag. But here is the biological shift you completely missed. As the day warms up, the natural insects and plankton begin to rise off the bottom and suspend in the middle layers of the water column. Naturally, the entire school of fish follows this food source upwards. The fish are still right in front of you. They are extremely hungry and ready for a frenzy, but they are swimming 10 feet above your bait, completely ignoring it. You think the spot is dead and decide to leave. If you had simply adjusted your rig to fish in the mid-water layer, your float would have vanished under the water instantly. You are packing up because you refuse to adapt to the changing environment. The feeding frenzy is happening right now, just a few feet higher than you are willing to look. One of the most tragic errors in modern fishing is the habit of overfeeding a spot and then abandoning it too early. You arrive at the lake, mix up a huge bucket of expensive ground bait, and throw 20 heavy balls into your chosen spot. You are expecting an instant reaction. When 2 hours go by without a massive bite, you get frustrated, you think you chose the wrong spot, so you pack up and move, or you just go home. Here is the reality of what you just did. By throwing all that food into the water, you created a massive, confusing buffet for the fish. They swim in, eat a huge amount of the loose feed, and completely ignore your tiny hook bait hidden in the middle. Then they sit there, digesting the food. It takes time for them to get hungry again and start searching for the remaining scraps. The moment they finally finish digesting and start frantically vacuuming up the bottom to find that one last piece of food, which happens to be your hook, you are already gone. You spent your hard-earned money to feed the fish, and you left exactly 10 minutes before they were ready to reward you with a huge catch. We are all heavily influenced by the fishermen around us, whether we admit it or not. You are sitting in your spot feeling okay about the day, but then you look over at the guy fishing to your left. He is packing up his gear. He complains loudly that the lake is dead and the pressure is completely wrong today. Suddenly you start feeling the same way. You look at the guy to your right and he is sleeping in his chair. The contagious nature of giving up spreads down the bank like a virus. You convince yourself that if nobody else is catching anything, you definitely will not either. So you start packing your bags to join the crowd of defeated anglers. This herd mentality ruins more fishing trips than bad weather. The truth is, most fishermen are terribly impatient. When the guy next to you packs up, he takes his lines out of the water. This actually reduces the pressure on the fish in your area. With fewer baits in the water, the fish feel safer. The moment your impatient neighbor drives away, the fish will likely move directly into your area to start feeding. By following the crowd, you are walking away exactly when your odds are at their absolute best. There is a magical biological event that happens on almost every body of water, and most ordinary fishermen completely ignore its timing. I am talking about the natural insect hatch. Throughout the long, boring morning, the water seems completely lifeless. You are exhausted, staring at a motionless rod tip and making the final decision to pack up and head for home. But deep in the weeds, millions of insect larvae have reached the perfect temperature to begin their journey to the surface. It happens like a switch being flipped. Suddenly, the water column is filled with ascending insects. The fish know exactly when this is going to happen. They have been waiting all morning, conserving their energy for this exact high-protein feast. Just as you are folding down your umbrella, the water begins to boil as the fish intercept the hatch. It is a violent, incredible feeding frenzy that only lasts for about 45 minutes. If you pack up based on your watch instead of watching the subtle signs of insect life around the edge of the water, you will consistently miss the most aggressive, explosive fishing action of the entire week. Let us wrap this up by looking at the ultimate shift in mindset you need to make right now. The difference between a guy who catches monster fish and a guy who goes home empty-handed is almost always just one single hour of patience. You have to stop looking at fishing as a vending machine where you put in bait and instantly get a fish. It does not work like that. Fishing is a game of intercepting natural cycles. The feeding frenzy is coming. It always comes. It is driven by the sun, the wind, the water pressure, and the biology of the fish. When you feel that overwhelming urge to pack up, when you are frustrated, bored, and tired, you must train yourself to stop. Sit back down, look at the water. Realize that your frustration is a sign that the cycle is about to shift. The weak fishermen leave, taking their lines out of the water and making it safer for the big fish to come out. The noisy guys leave, returning the lake to a peaceful state. The moment you are ready to give up is the exact moment the environment is finally perfect for the fish. Stay for one more hour, trust the process, outlast the crowd, and you will be sitting right in the middle of the feeding frenzy of a lifetime. So let us look at the big picture. You came to the water with hope, you waited all morning, and you almost left right before the real magic happened. The most unexpected turning point in any fishing trip is realizing that your own intense desire to pack up and leave is actually the best indicator that the underwater environment has finally settled down. The water has warmed up, the quiet has allowed the fish to feel safe, and the chain reaction of the food web is finally peaking. Understanding this single concept changes your entire approach to fishing. It transforms you from a guy relying on blind luck into a strategic angler who uses endurance as his greatest weapon. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with us on the bank today. If this video changed the way you think about your next fishing trip, please hit that subscribe button, leave a big like, and join our community. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever caught your absolute biggest fish right when you are actively packing up your gear to leave? Tell us your story in the comments below and let us discuss.